was incredible what we were doing there, and I was learning every day and surrounded by brilliant minds, inquisitive minds, and I was like, look, I loved doing that. I loved being part of that journey, and I want to do it myself. And I suppose it was at that moment that I was like, right, I'm gonna make the leap. I really felt I had a lot to prove. Stepping off was scary. I mean, my mum still tells people I'm a lawyer. I think it was all of that information together that I was like, okay, this is what needs to exist. And I really wanted it to be about women, not about baby. And you have a lot of people, and what people ask you for and what they actually want are never the same.
Yeah.
They're very rarely.
You're completely right. Yeah.
And I really think that is something that men have gatekept forever. People were not excited about this market.
Really?
Pure hustle. And I really mean that. What about when you don't even know that you have anything? You're just trying. Yeah. If you're going through that, and what does that look like? Because I was like, there is so much here. Well, I need to know these things are coming to me. Tell me what's going to happen to me and I'll know how to manage it.
Welcome to The Startup Leap, the #1 podcast interviewing startup founders who have taken the leap into starting their own businesses.
Here on The Startup Leap, we hear real, raw, and relatable stories of these entrepreneurs, how they've navigated taking the leap, decisions they've made.
We are your hosts, Yvonne
and Maria, and this is the Startup Leap podcast.
Yvonne and Maria are partners at Local Globe and OpenSeed VC, respectively. Local Globe and OpenSeed are independent of the Startup Leap podcast. Any statements made by Maria, Yvonne, or the Startup Leap guests are solely their view and are not advice. Endorsements by the Startup Leap, its guests, Maria and Yvonne.
So welcome to another episode of The Startup Leap, the #1 pod where incredible founders share their journey on how they took the leap to start their own business and the intricacies of what it took to do that. We're your host, Yvonne.
And I'm Maria.
And I'm super excited about today's guest. We have a guest who really just highlights how incredible founders can come from the corporate world and build like really great businesses. So Michelle, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, you were an M&A lawyer and you went from, being embedded in billable hours, working on all these legal documents with clients, to becoming the deputy CEO of a really large tech dating company, and then actually taking the leap to start your own startup. And not only that, also being a board advisor for one of the most successful dating apps in the world. So tell us, Michelle, so when you decided to start Peanut, tell us, how did you make that leap? And what were some of the fears that you had at the time when you were making that leap from working at a startup, a very well-funded PE-backed startup, to starting your own thing?
And if you remember the moment too, because it's often a moment where it would be lovely to get the nuance of that as well.
Well, there's nothing more humbling, and that is the only word I can use to describe it. There is nothing more humbling than going from kind of running a big organization, 300 people plus. There are teams and people who do things, and all of a sudden you are the people and the team who do all the things. And that was a real change and a step change, and probably something that I hadn't even really thought about. And I hadn't imagined that part of it, actually. And when you do that thing where you're envisaging, okay, what is this really going to look like in practice? Right. You don't really think about some of the day-to-day. You just think, I'm going to launch this business and it's going to be the biggest platform in the world.
You don't know even.
And absolutely, you don't even know what you don't know. Yeah. That you couldn't even get there in your wildest dream and your wildest stretch. So I think running Badoo was amazing, so exciting. I loved it. It was incredible what we were doing there. And I was learning every day and surrounded by brilliant minds, inquisitive minds. And I suppose what we'd done and what we'd seen with the success of Bumble was very inspiring. And I was like, look, I loved doing that. I loved being part of that journey, and I want to do it myself. I want to go and do it in an area which I know and love, and where it feels completely underserved, and yet it feels like a massive opportunity. And actually, the moment, I feel like there were two. Okay. So the idea for it was really around, I was a new mom at the time that we were starting those conversations with Whitney and Bumble happened. I had a 6-month-old. So my life was like involved in searching the internet at 3 a.m. for like hints on why he wouldn't sleep, or, is it normal that he's doing this? And so I was living that world. And then by day running this company, and it was a real disconnect. So I had this concept that there should be something. And it needed to be modern and fresh and feel like me as a mother, not my mum, which is what every other platform out there felt like. And then I did nothing with it. It was busy, life's busy, you're trying to do a million things all the time. And it wasn't really until Finn got to kind of 2.5.
And Finn's your son.
That's my boy. Yeah. And I just felt like the bigger the kid, the bigger the problem. Like, this is not going anywhere. And actually, I just have more questions, and I need women more, and I need to ask their advice more, and I need more support. And I suppose it was at that moment that I was like, right, I'm going to make the leap. Yeah. And I think I had saved money. I had a little war chest. I mean, laughable, nowhere near enough. But I had that, and I had a concept, and I kind of just went out, perhaps a little bit naively, but this is what I'm going to build, and it's going to be amazing, and we're going to change the world. And so I stepped into a world of pitching my startup with nothing other than a deck, which even when I look at that deck in hindsight,
your first deck is always horrible. You cringe when you see, you're like, no.
There's some choice slides in there that I'm like, oh gosh. So you go from that moment and you get your first term sheet, and you get some other people who are crazy enough to come on the journey with you, who are like, okay, we love this too. And you just go. And so I think from there, I had so much to prove. I had to prove that I could do it, that the corporate person could be the startup entrepreneur, right? There were so many things I had to prove. And I felt that was such I really felt I had a lot to prove. And that was from that I understand product and I can build product. That was from a brand, and I understand brand and marketing. Like, there were so many areas where I had to prove that I knew I could do it. That probably just kept me unrelentingly driving forward. Yeah,
I love that. I would love to talk. There's this thing, the concept of the partner test. Before you take any big leap, you have a conversation and you're like, hey, we're probably not going to make as much money as we were making before, because I've decided to go chase this incredible dream. What was that for you? Who did you need to get buy-in from? And who thought you were crazy? Like, who did you need to get buy-in from after you'd gotten the conviction yourself within your friends and family? And how did that even help? Like,
it's such a great question. It's such a great question. I mean, there were so many things that were happening all at once, and so my partner's amazing. He's incredible and was very supportive, and actually had been very supportive about me kind of making a step on from law.
I see.
He's a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
And so was very much like, we don't both need to live this life. I've got this. And so I think that was probably a starting point of him kind of being encouraging to say, you can do more, you could be more, and there is more there. So he's very supportive on that front. In terms of that decision about, life is going to change, and nursery fees.
And you had a kid at the time as well.
And a mortgage and bills, and there's so much that goes with that. And that's the other thing that people don't really understand about the difference between male founders and female founders, and why we don't have, why there's that gap, because actually we have a lot of things that mean that we can't just step off. Absolutely. Right? So stepping off was scary. And there were choices that we made and sacrifices to be made. I think Rich was really in it with me and was very much like,
that probably helps.
We're going for it. And, what's the worst? We've tried. And I suppose that's always been the mentality of like, what's the worst? Like and also a plan B. And I think that's really important. I remember when I was dreaming this, there was a very successful business. And the founder had said that when you're a founder, there's no plan B. You can only go for plan A because it has to work. And I was like, that makes me feel suffocated because you have to have plan A, B, C, D. Like, I've got a kid. There is no, like, of course I have to have that. So from that perspective, I think I was really, I do have a plan B. Okay. I stay on the board of the companies that for as long as I can. I can always go back and be a consultant. I can always go back and be a lawyer. So I have like plans and there is another route. Or I can start again and do it all again. But I'm going for it. And you just have to, it's like partial courageousness, partial stupidity.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And then we just went with it. But in terms of getting people on board, I mean, my mum still tells people I'm a lawyer.
I mean, I'm a VC and my mum tells people I'm an accountant, so I totally get it.
I mean, it's one of those things. My mum's just like Irish woman and just cannot cope with the idea that I've like given up the law. So she's a lawyer. And that's all she says.
And you spoke a lot about courage, and just keen to understand, where do you feel that came from before Badoo, before, like, did it come from your days as a lawyer or way back in your childhood? What was it that you felt gave you that courage to actually press ahead and do it? Because so many are crippled by that fear of, actually, this is quite daunting.
Yeah.
I think part of the courage was not knowing. So it's, you know, you're just kind of stepping out.
It's like ignorance is bliss. It's better you don't know sometimes.
And you just don't know. So you're going out there and you're going for it. So part of it is the not knowing. Part of it was just, I mean, my mum is an amazing woman and was always very much like, of course you can do anything. I mean, as long as it was an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor, you could do anything that you want to do, right? Of these very specific things. But she very much was like, well, there's nothing that you can't do. And I suppose I just had a bit of that mentality of, okay, well, she said it, so it must be true. That's another part of it. And then probably the final part is, you know, some of it has to be ego, and that has to be, and I don't mean it in a negative sense.
I love that you don't mean it in a negative sense.
I mean it has to be like, I have something to prove and I want to do it, and I have to, my ego needs me to succeed and therefore I'm going to keep going. And there are points actually where my ego has probably taken a backseat, and it's never a good thing, you know, in that situation, because you do need that in order to have that self-belief. Of course this will work. No.
Absolutely. Cool. And just looking back at your journey, so obviously you made the leap from being an M&A lawyer to then working at Badoo in-house and then becoming deputy CEO. That is quite an unusual move. Yeah. Tell us more about that leap that you took to being a CEO.
Yeah, that was a weird move. I admit. I actually had left private practice. So I was a private practice M&A, and I went to work for a client in-house in biotech. So very different world, very different kind of experience. And
was the goal to work in-house, or did that naturally
What's the goal? I mean, yeah, I think actually what it was, I didn't love private practice, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, quite frankly. So you're at law school and you have these like idealistic dreams of what it is going to be like to be a lawyer, and then you become a lawyer and you're like, oh. So actually I'm also a salesperson. No one told me that. And also some of this work is not exciting and it doesn't stimulate, and you know, that is quite hard. So I chose M&A because I actually did like the adrenaline of the deals. At least there was that. Right, because litigation actually was not what I thought it was going to be. You know, that's a barrister. Didn't know that at the time. But anyway. So I kind of probably was always with an eye to thinking about what else I could do with this life, because I definitely did not feel I wanted to be doing 3 a.m. closes all the time. How foolish.
I know, it's so funny. Like,
obviously,
that's exactly what you're doing right now.
But anyway, at the time, how I laugh. So I felt very much like I didn't want to be in that world. Actually, I had been approached about going in-house somewhere else, and the law firm had talked me round into staying. So I'd missed the boat once, and I'd stayed, and I'd taken the money instead, and I was like, fine. And then I went to work in-house for a client because I was doing lots of M&A for them. So it made sense to go in-house with them. I knew their business. And it wasn't that the business wasn't exciting, it just wasn't in a field that I was totally impassioned about. But it was an amazing experience. I got to go to every board meeting. I got to understand like what they were doing and how they were integrating the business and what they were building. And we had one PE backer. So I got to understand that kind of investor relations piece. So that was a really like fundamental part of, okay, I want to be here. I know this is a core part of what I want. And then it was the law firm who I used to work for called me and said, look, there's this client that we have and it's a dating website. I was like, no. absolutely not. My mum will kill me. It's a definite no. And I met the founder and I was like, this is weird because I didn't think it would be you. It's like a young guy, and went into this office in Soho and there's all these young guys writing code. I was like, no one's in a suit. Yeah. It's exciting.
Different.
Yeah. Wow. And, drinking Red Bull and eating hula hoops and coding. And they had this ticker, and I remember the ticker, and it was on a big screen. They had 52 million users. Wow. And I'd never heard of the platform. And I was like, wait, what is this? And I couldn't understand it. And I suppose it was just at the time that Facebook was really coming into its own. Yeah. So it was still pretty early. Yeah. We're talking like 2010. Right. So I think Facebook had just opened an office in London. And so tech really was not being spoken about like it is now. Like it was definitely a different world. And so I did it. I took the leap and I joined his company. And I've never looked back. I mean, the best decision I ever made over spaghetti carbonara.
I love it. I love it. I would love us to talk a bit about Peanut.
Yes.
First of all, incredible name.
Thanks. Great name.
It's an amazing name. So tell us, I think it was a very different time.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. I think like those baby or mom websites were like, browser pages of like weird links. They were not the best thing to look at. And you brought that incredible mobile experience. What did you see? Like when... At that time, femtech wasn't the rave it is now.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, like, what was that thing that made you feel like, okay, I could build in this space that I hadn't quite seen other people build in? And what were you trying to achieve if you had to strip everything down for Peanut?
I think what I was doing in my personal life and in my private life was trying to find information, right? And that's all. I didn't have, my girlfriends didn't have babies. Yeah. I didn't have that kind of community and that network. I'm an only child, so it's not like I've got siblings and any kind of relationship there. And the family that I do have are in Ireland or they're in Scotland. Like I was very much not in a familial environment either where I could get connection. So I just needed answers, simple things that you just don't know until you have this tiny person and they arrive. And so I was using the forums. Yeah. And I remember so clearly, I had a really good girlfriend, and I was telling her, I've been reading about sleep, and what I've got to do is leave him crying. And she looked at me and she went, says who? And she's very dry anyway, says who? And I said, no, I read it on this forum. And she was like, just so I'm clear, you wouldn't read a forum for what you put on your face, but you're going to read a forum for what you do with your baby. Yeah. And I had this moment of, right. And she said, how do you know that's even a mum that's written that? Yeah. How do you know? And I was like, how do I know it's even a mum? And that was probably one really good starting point of, I actually want mums. That's what I'm looking for. Someone who knows this stuff. Anonymity is not going to work in this environment, right? Faceless, ghostless people writing comments on threads on the internet is not the thing. So that was clear to me. So then I used a Facebook group. I actually had to rejoin Facebook. At this point, I had left Facebook. So I was back on the Facebook, as my mum calls it. I was back on the Facebook, and I was looking in these groups because at least they weren't faceless, right? But still, that was great. I could get an answer. I felt a bit more confident about who was giving it to me. But I couldn't then say, oh, thanks, Joe. Do you want to go for a coffee? Like, I don't know Joe. And she's not there for that purpose either. So it felt obvious that there needed to be something to tie this all in. I needed to have a better version of authenticity. Yeah. I needed a better version of finding that friendship. And then I suppose the final part of that was, I knew at that point how valuable I was as a consumer. I was ready to spend money. I was ready to invest. I wanted to do it. And people were talking to me like I was, well, not like I was me. Yeah, right. And that just felt completely removed from what I wanted. And I suppose it was seeing there were other movements happening. Yeah. So obviously Bumble and how we spoke to women, that was very influential. At the time in the US, there was a women-only members club called The Wing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so there was that movement of, okay, women want to be together, and the women's marches. Yeah. So there was a very big indication to me that no one's they're all looking at that demo. Right, okay. But who's looking at my demo? Because I'm only 2 years out of that they're coming through.
Yeah.
And they're going to expect that there's something that there isn't. I can tell you for free. I'm on the forums. So we have to do something better than that. So I think it was all of that information together that I was like, okay, this is what needs to exist. And I really wanted it to be about women, not about baby.
Okay.
It's a lot about baby. I wanted it to speak to me. Yeah. And I wanted it to feel that moment where you're thinking about having a baby, or you're pregnant, or you have a baby and you're like, oh, can't wait to download Peanut now. That was I wanted it to be that moment and that feeling. So there was a lot of different information gathering. And I did a lot of weird stuff. Like I joined a lot of mum groups on Facebook, and I basically kept a tally of when I saw new names coming into the group and then when they disappeared. So I was like, so I could kind of get a feel for what churn looked like in the groups. And so even you join a group, there's like 20,000 women. Yeah. It's like 300 of them are engaged at that moment, right? But you don't, when do you leave a Facebook group? You don't leave it. Yeah. So it was that kind of thing where I was like, okay, so that's what that churn or that retention looks like. I wonder what would have kept them longer. Speaking to the admins of the Facebook groups. I mean, there was one woman, I was like, bring your group to Peanut. She was like, no. And then messaged me a few months later and was like, do you still want my group? So it was that kind of thing. I did a lot of that kind of work.
Stuff that doesn't scale, like stuff that actually gets you knowing the customer.
Absolutely.
I love that.
But you know, even to think about it now, I'm like, wow, that was weird that I did that stuff. But great.
Yeah. I'm sure it played such a huge role in shaping Peanut into what it is today.
Totally. Yeah. And also actually the feedback loop is still really important. Yeah. Obviously it's a different stage now because you have a lot of voices and you have a lot of people, and what people ask you for and what they actually want are never the same. Yeah. They're very rarely.
You're completely right. Yeah.
So they might say what we want is this and it can be completely different. Yeah. During COVID, you couldn't make friends. Yeah. Right? The whole proposition of Peanut is make friends. Yeah. Well, I can't see you in real life. I can't meet you, so no point. But actually, I do want to talk to women. I want to have that community and I want to feel connected. And isn't this the worst ever? Because now everyone's at home and I'm stuck with them. And, you know, all of that. And they just wanted to like have those conversations. And so they said, like, we want to be able to see each other. Okay, so we spent a quarter building video chat, integrated it.
I just say Peanut was a lifesaver for me. I was pregnant during COVID and honestly don't know what I would have done without it.
Thank you. It was, I mean, I had, also for me, my daughter was like 10 months old and it was very hard in COVID. No classes. 100%. She didn't walk, she didn't talk, you know, all of the things that you're used to, and you just needed to be like, is it okay?
What's going on?
Happening to anyone else? You know, she was walking up to lampposts for like hand sanitizer. She was so used to the hand sanitizer. It was really sad. It was devastating. Anyway, so we built video chat because women were like, we need to see each other.
No one used it. Oh my gosh.
Of course not, because the last thing we want to do is another screen.
Yeah. When you've during COVID. Oh, that
if you've been on homeschooling, of course you don't want to see your own face.
It's almost like Zoom fatigue was a very real thing.
It was very real. And what was even more frustrating is that Clubhouse came out at the time.
Oh, of course.
And we'd been talking about live audio first. And we went with video because people were saying, we want to see each other. And so it was this moment of, ugh. And you feel sick and you're really frustrated. And then you're like, no, it's fine. They do it first. We'll learn from them. And we picked out the bits that we thought were working. And live audio on Peanut now still exists. It's about synchronous connection, one of the best parts of the product, in my opinion. Women get to, you can drop in any time they're talking just to hear women's voices. There's something really like humanizing about it. So plenty of listening to customers, but maybe slightly differently now.
Yeah. Cool.
That's interesting.
Can we talk a little bit about fundraising? So,
do we have to?
Tell us about your journey. So you started Peanut. Obviously, you said you had a bit of a war chest, and you went out to pursue the seed round. You went straight from. You didn't do like a friends and family round.
I didn't have any friends.
In hindsight, do you wish that you did?
Yeah, great question. I mean, honestly, I didn't have a network who had casual 20Ks lying around to write me check.
And a lot of founders don't, right?
I didn't have that network. And actually, at the time, I mean, it was a very different world. So as you said, no femtech, no like funds focused on investing in women. It wasn't a thing. And I was going and pitching to these people who were like, oh, you know, my wife, she's on Facebook a lot. I'm like, cool. So, there was a lot of, it was very challenging in that way. I didn't even really understand a friends and family round until I think someone had said, you should do a friends and family round. My friend just raised 500K. From friends?
Not my friends.
My friends don't even own their house. I couldn't even imagine what that was. And really what we were talking about is networking.
Right.
And I think as women, and it's something we're better at now, but I had never known the importance of a professional network in that sense. So I knew what it was like to build a professional network because I needed to speak to someone at Apple and I needed to have but I didn't really understand what that really meant on a wider scale. And even now I feel I'm playing catch up. There was so many times that I didn't think about the future and why it's so important. And I really think that is something that men have gatekeeped forever. Because if you go right back to the Masons, they were all networking.
True.
And we haven't been doing that. And so even, that realization of like, I should have been nurturing so many of these relationships. And it's the one thing that I wish I could redo. So I didn't know about friends and family. It didn't have the friends and family, frankly. And so I went straight to institutional. And because I didn't know VC, but I knew PE. It wouldn't be that different. And in hindsight, yes, I wish I hadn't taken institutional money so early. Because once you take institutional money, you're on someone else's timeline. And it changes the dynamic of what you're building. And particularly for me, I had no product. I was pre-product. So I was pre-product market fit and was already on I'd set my clock effectively. So
and 1 year you mentioned then, right?
And how much did you raise for? Did you raise for the typical 18 months, 24 months? When you say that you're on a timer,
from the first round I did, I raised, it was like a 16 to 18 month runway. I raised within the year. So but that's what I mean, because that's the pressure, right?
Yeah,
now you have to be raising
every other
every year, and at least having conversations ready for the next to gear up. So I do think that started earlier. And I mean, the valuations were totally different. Life was different.
Yeah, it was a different time.
It was a totally different world. And even now when people talk about femtech, I'm like, wow, I mean, there's so much, there is so much capital out there, which is exciting and is the way it should be, but it certainly wasn't back then. And so, yes, I wish I hadn't taken institutional so early. And I think there are opportunities now, even if you don't have the friends and family network, there are angel networks, syndicates,
microfunds, early stage funds,
much more accessible than I mean, that really wasn't a thing, and I think it is now.
Cool,
interesting. Can I ask, just between raising that first funding round, you said you went in with a deck. I feel like, to be honest, in 2017, I'm like, the fact that you even raised is even incredible. Especially for a consumer company, and I don't know the heuristic for what it was then. And now, I'm curious, how did you think about the team? How did you think about even the networks? I'm sure Badoo helped. I'm sure maybe your relationship, at Bumble, doing that helped. But how did you navigate that first bit where you're speaking to investors, but it's like pre-product that's pretty much taking a bet on you and whoever else potentially joined you as a co-founder? Yeah,
that was hard. Yes, of course, because I was coming from a successful, profitable company. That was exciting. People were not excited about this market.
Really?
And so the conversation, I could always get the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
That is an absolute, and I will say that the fact that I was from Badoo and we, and Bumble was flying high, I could get the meeting. But as soon as people learned the space that I was in, they were like, why don't you just do dating again? You're so good at dating. That was a constant conversation.
What was the worry? Like, what was the constant thing that they kept?
Why? I mean, ironic. Why? If this was an opportunity, why isn't there something out there? Why hasn't someone done it?
Someone has to do it for someone to
exactly. Because someone has to be first.
It's like the chicken and the egg,
right? And also because there weren't women in tech, and so they haven't experienced that life stage, because all the people that you invest in are 25-year-old white guys, right? That like, it's not rocket science as to why it doesn't exist. They're not living the experience I'm living. So there was a bit of that. There was a bit of, oh, well, you know, there are legacy players on the market. They'll be difficult to displace.
Exactly.
Said every like starter, like, you know, so there was a lot of that, but and I think that the confidence in the market was very much around dating. That was new, but you know, you have to remember, at a time when I joined the dating world, online dating was totally gross. It was definitely seen as like, you know, it wasn't. Tinder really changed everything.
It's a bit of a taboo at that point, right?
Absolutely. People met online and everyone would be like, they met online. It was a weird thing. And now, you know, how many friends do you have? I actually think most of my friends met on a dating app.
It's true.
And, you know, we Bumble babies and Tinder babies. And, you know, so it is completely transformed. And that was the narrative that I was trying to explain. Look, you don't think that women need this, but they want this and they need this. And they're bending existing products to try and fit this purpose. And we can make it all.
And like tactically, first 1,000 customers, because I loved your explanation of actually going on the groups and like, look, because I think you have to do stuff like that, especially if you're building something entirely new. You need to understand the customer intimately and existing models. So I'm curious, like, first 1,000 customers, yes, you had this deck, you had this vision, now kind of moving the line to an actual product. What was that process like?
So I interviewed lots of women, and every woman that I interviewed, I asked her to introduce me to one more.
Smart.
Right.
So by the time that I'd done those interviews, I had like 200 women who I'd spoken to, who all felt a small attachment to Peanut, if not like a deep connection. They kind of knew what I was doing. It was the easiest thing in the world then to go and say, can you all go, we're going live tomorrow. Can you go and download it? And can you test it?
Okay.
So that was very easy to kind of get that baseline and that feedback, and they're excited. They're naturally going to be your ambassadors because they will feel part of the journey. So I think that was part one. Part two was pure hustle. And I really mean that. Go, where are women and being where they are? So we had this concept over rave stickers. So if you think about when you walk down the street and you would see these like rave stickers on lampposts and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd be like, who is raving in Hampstead? Because I'm not. I've got the baby right here. And I couldn't understand, like, and someone's going around sticking the rave stickers everywhere, and I just couldn't understand it. So we decided we'd do Peanut rave stickers.
I love that.
And it was, you know, basically like, I can't remember, Hannah in my team, who's complete genius, had done this like, pee, poop, sleep, repeat kind of thing. And they were all over, you know, they were everywhere. We were kind of, and I still see some today. I'm always like, but it was that kind of thing. Like, what are the things that we had very little to spend? So what can we do effectively, cheaply, that will catch people's eye, that will make people think, what is that? And we were very, very consistent in storytelling. And I believe that the importance of a consumer brand is storytelling. And we never stopped telling that story. I would tell it over and over again, because actually the brilliant thing about our audience is just more babies being born.
It's like it never ends.
Right?
It's like
so more women who hear the story and they're like, that's me. And so it never ends, and it's a really important part of what we did.
Cool. Today, Peanut is across the globe, right? Millions of users, UK, US. Talk to us, like, from the early days, did you always set out to build something that was global? And how did you go about building the customer base, consumer base in the US as well?
Yeah, the US was really important to me because Badoo had not historically had any success in the US. And it had always been a really challenging country for us, or territory for us. And the reason I think it was, again, slightly different world, different time, but generally speaking, products came from the US and then we adopted them, right? So with the exception of like a Spotify, everything really started there and then it came to us. It didn't go the other way. And if it didn't feel like a US product, it was really difficult to land in the US. And we really resolved that with Bumble, and you know, that was an amazing kind of insight into why that's so important. And so for me, it was very clear to take the learnings that I'd kind of observed there and thought, right, this has to land in the US and it has to feel like a US product. And
so you were thinking about that from day one?
From day one. In fact, way more important than the UK at that point, because I just knew I felt confident in the UK market.
Right.
I felt I could do that, but I had to learn about the US and what that looked like. Also, you have to remember that the US really operates like lots of different countries. It's not one country. Every state is very different. And so it was really about understanding those states and where the opportunities are. Are we coastal? Are we mainland? Like, what does that look like? Who are our users there? And even now, our users across the US are very different. Like, you see different behaviors. And if you're coastal, you might just be using Peanut just to find that friend, and you're quite kind of get in, get out. And then if you're in a different part of the States, you might be very much more community-minded. Right. You're spending hours every day. You're cultivating your life around that. You know, it really depends. So the US was super important to me, and yes, I always wanted that. It's really interesting for the UK. UK is our fastest growing market, and it's very exciting to see. Obviously, I love that. Love to see it. And I think that's really exciting. And what I think I've seen along the way is how many players have kind of come and gone. And that's been really interesting, both in the US and the UK. They kind of appear, and everyone momentarily says, have you seen it? And I'm like, it's fine. It's so hard. Wish them well, because it's so hard. And then they go, and it is really hard. Right. So you do have to be constantly understanding the behaviors of the user base and why your product might differ slightly, and how to really tailor it.
I really wanted to touch on, because I think Peanut starts, with women, but there's such a broad experience to the range of a woman. It's like trying to have a baby.
Right.
And that, I don't think that was a taboo topic then, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think it still kind of is now. So I really wanted to navigate a bit of that, because you did start with, babies and women giving birth, but there's that journey too, and there's that journey post. And I found a lot of people actually use Peanut for that journey too as well. Absolutely. So I would love to talk about how you've kind of seen that evolution, and then maybe also some of your predictions of how you think the market will grow. The market is growing. Femtech is like hormonal, it's like weight management. It's like, there's so many different angles to it. So I'm curious, maybe on one hand, talk about the spectrum of like the woman experience and how Peanut kind of saw that and adapted quickly as it went. And then secondly, just your broader view of how you think the market will evolve.
So in terms of kind of the life stages and the evolution of Peanut, I think there was always a moment when I was early days of Peanut, people would say, but when they've had the baby, they don't need Peanut anymore. And I was like, well, firstly, women need women. It's just how it is. And also children evolve. You have a second child, life changes. So I always felt confident about that part. What we saw is women who were talking about secondary infertility. That was what started the trying to conceive element. So women who had had a first journey into motherhood were struggling to have a second or a third, and were kind of joining groups around it. And what I felt was, well, what about all the women with primary fertility challenges? What about their journey? What about when you don't even know that you have anything? You're just trying, and you want to find out what that looks like. How do we present that? So we launched Trying to Conceive, and that was really about making sure those women feel supported. It's a walled garden, so if you're in that community, you'll never see anyone who is pregnant or a mother. It's really just about those women being together and being able to share their kind of experience. And that was so important, because what I knew is it would be a feeder to the next life stage, whatever your route. If it was IVF, if it's adoption, if it's surrogacy, as soon as you enter motherhood, you're staying with Peanut to have that next phase. And so that felt like quite a natural evolution. I think then what we see is, as the distance between motherhood and menopause reduces, we have babies later, we're going through menopause earlier. That felt like a clear step that we had permission to help women have those conversations. But for Peanut, where do you go to talk about that, right? If you're going through that, and what does that look like? So many women, and I didn't know until we started looking at it, the early symptoms of perimenopause start at 36.
Really?
Wow,
I didn't know that.
Right?
Oh my God.
So that earliest kind of start of your body thinking about that is actually around 36. Wow. Well, for me, I was like, wait, what? And then you start to learn more. And then it became like such a clear, it was an obsession actually, because I was like, there is so much here. There is a depletion of a hormone which is directly related to your short-term memory. And it depletes all through perimenopause. It is entirely absent for the year of full menopause, and then it completely returns. It is unbelievable to me that no one's ever spoken about it, right? Well, I need to know these things are coming to me. Yeah. Tell me what's going to happen to me and I'll know how to manage it. But if you hold that back from me, I don't know what life will look like. So I really felt like we needed to be the ones to do that. Frankly, also, I wasn't going to let a man build a product around that. And I could see that there was the start of something there. I was like, that's not something that I'm willing to have. So I wanted to make it clear that is the direction of travel for us. We want women across life stages. Yeah. You know, in the future, I want young women who are thinking about first time sex and body changes and hormonal issues. I want them to have a safe space. Where are they going? And it better not be TikTok, right? Yeah. I want those women to have a safe space where they can learn and ask and share, right through to what about women who are in their later life and they're thinking about what's next for them and empty nest and opportunities and boredom and you know, how they feel their time. Like there's so many other areas there. So I really believe that we have permission to own that entire life cycle. And, you know, then what you start to see and what we want to see is women who then their daughter is using peanut and it feeds in, and that's what we want to build. In terms of the market and the direction of travel for the market, it's so interesting. And I truly believe we don't know what we don't know. In 2010, if anyone had told me that we'd build native products on our phone that then would be marketed via an app store, I would have been like, what? Right? And that happened in such a short order from there. So I think we don't know what that is yet, right? And whether that is OpenAI's like ChatGPT store, where you're going and searching for new plugins, I don't know how that will transform things. But I am clear that any developments in AI should only be positive. I don't think that they change the need for human interaction. I hope that we're changing more of the taboo around what we can and can't talk about. I think people in public positions and who are in the public eye are more open. I think actually it serves them well to do it, so they do become more open. I think we talk about fertility and baby loss in a way that perhaps wasn't happening. But you're right, there's still quite a stigma and a taboo. We still have issues around aging, which are, you know, we don't allow women to age. And, you know, there's so much around that I hope is challenging or going to be challenged. So I don't know if I know it, but I definitely feel that the discovery of information is changing. And I think AI should help that.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, I really enjoyed the conversation. So before we wrap up, we'd love to do a quick round of fire questions.
Love it.
So, time machine. If you could go back and right at the beginnings of Peanut, ask or, you know, just speak to your younger self, what would you advise yourself? Is there anything that in hindsight you would advise or do differently?
In 1 minute. This time machine lasts 1 minute.
Oh, it's a 1 minute time machine. Oh, that's really hard. No, I wouldn't change it. Not in a minute. Not in a minute. Listen, I can't change it because every mistake I made informed a decision that made things better. So I can't change it.
Would you tell her anything?
Don't take institution so early. Wait a second.
I love that.
Probably that.
One final question. So Michelle, in the metaverse, if you weren't building Peanut, what would you be doing?
Oh, another great one. What would I don't know. Something social.
Build
law.
But not law. No.
Definitely not law.
Maybe what you do. I love to invest. I do investing. Personally. I invest in funds. I would love to do more investing. I get really excited. I'm so passionate about that early build. And I get really motivated by it. So probably investing.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today. We really enjoyed the conversation. We're so grateful that you were able to share your authentic story with our listeners. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.